Hi folks, you're with us today, Tacitus today at your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about there was a series of business summits around the world about discussing the lack of critical thinking skills in students today, or talking about recent times. They're suggesting 20 years or so, and they're particularly focusing on what they assert is the lack of critical thinking skills, even in people who've done the more advanced tertiary education, such as masters and PhDs. And why is this? Why is there lack of critical thinking? Now, I guess you need to look at two sides. What do they say is critical thinking, and thus how do they arrive at the supposed lack of it? And how detached from reality they are in a number of ways when the people who are discussing it and frothing at the mouth about it are all affirmative action appointments, all people that are very, very much on board with equal race, gender outcomes, and everybody should get a participation certificate and so on. So the real issues around why there is a lack of critical thinking skills, there was not one speaker, certainly, that I looked at. And again, all the speakers are affirmative action people. There's lesbians were everywhere, and this sort of thing, and black lesbians. So instead of actually dealing with the issue, they tried to turn it into yet more detachment from reality than it already was. So I'll touch on the main things. Now, talking about sort of critical thinking, I guess, how do we acquire critical thinking skills? It can be exhaustive examination of, say, it could be current or historical events, but exhaustive examination of them in a class, in college or university, and even in high school. A history teacher I'll use as an example, or even an English teacher, as I recall, but I'll use history as this example. The teacher not only encouraged, but effectively insisted that we had to present multiple points of view of a historic event. We had to argue the for and against case, if you will, and a neutral position or a central position where both arguments or a for and against argument were synthesized into one. Now, I considered that laborious and sort of, well, what's the point? But I didn't appreciate the discipline, or the beginnings, if you like, of the discipline it gave me, because it forced me to think, or the other students as well, it forced me to think of both sides of the question, and why an event that may be irrelevant to those ideologically disposed in one direction could be particularly relevant to those disposed in a different direction, and vice versa. So this arguing both the cases, so you could sort of make an argument, say, and I'll go back in history here for Napoleonic Wars in Europe. The primary reason for the wars, at least in the beginning, was that the French had deposed a king, which was considered to be, that couldn't go unpunished. And it wasn't that there had been any transgression. The French hadn't tried to invade someone else's borders, or that was the real. And the second thing, the continuation of the wars, was that Napoleon Bonaparte, when he became first consul and later emperor, which enraged the European aristocracy, that they thought we got to teach this upstart, this bum a lesson. Now, it just so happened that upstart that they wanted to slap around, it just so happened he was, one of the most gifted military tacticians in history. So it's all very well to decide you want to slap him around. It's quite another matter to do it, and it took them many attempts to succeed at it. It wasn't for Napoleon's overreach in Russia, then he probably would have stayed on to a ripe old age. But nonetheless, this idea of seeing both sides was, I was encouraged, and the more reading I did, and I have some memory of this, is that it wasn't just a case of Napoleon throwing his weight around or something like that. There were a whole number of, why could the French continue these campaigns? Why could they sustain such heavy losses? How are they able to do this, that? And you just have to look at all the broader issues and then just determine that, well, this is actually a relevant point. It seems irrelevant, but Napoleon's ability to use artillery so effectively was at times decisive, or his ability to quick march an army, their ability to feed an army on the march, was their ability to assemble in order to a front line. These sort of things. These were innovations that Napoleon and the people around him introduced that made the French army the most formidable army at the time. But the thing about Napoleon being a sort of a provincial, bottom rung aristocrat meant that he wasn't entitled to hold a prominent position in any government, or certainly not head of state. And this was considered as an outrage to aristocrats everywhere, which motivated them probably more than a lot of other things. We got to put this punk in his place. And that figured into a lot of the things at the time, as it did, by the way, with Hitler as well, being a lower middle class guy, not even a German. He's from Austria, for goodness sakes. So anyway, that was the beginning of teaching critical thinking, the ability to see both sides or multiple sides of the question, also to consider relevance of what may seem at the beginning minor facts that really do play into the overall picture of what's going on. So, but also, of course, to relegate emotional, but in factual or material terms, much lesser facts. Now, as an adult, I remember my first supervisory job. I was probably too young to be put into it, but I got given the job anyway, and there was no honeymoon here. They didn't cut me any slack. Well, Billy Bob's only a young guy. Let's give him a chance or anything like that. We've given you the job. We expect you to perform. Now, it's in a commercial enterprise. It's in a very competitive field in the commercial world, and it's strictly pass or fail. So within hours of me being sort of given the job, the blowtorch came out, and I copped it full on. Now, when you've got responsibilities, you have to start making decisions, or did at the time. You need to start making decisions because you have to produce a successful outcome. I can't say, well, I failed horribly commercially, but hey, guess what? I employed 2 black lesbians. That didn't cut it. I mean, they're not interested. Hey, you get the job done. Why did you not get the job done? Why did you not prepare for this? Why did you not consider that? Why did you not look at this and that? Why did you not, and so on? That there was, it was brutal. What can I tell you? Now, some people I remember would, if they were in that situation, go, too much for me. I don't need this amount of crap or responsibility or accountability or anything like that. I'll go and go and do something else. I'll grow marijuana on the plantation. But for me, I wanted to succeed, and I wasn't prepared to accept that I'd made a failure of it. So, that sort of acceptance of response, you accept the response. I am responsible for this, and I'm going to deliver on that responsibility. It then causes you to or encourages and creates and fosters and furthers your critical thinking skills. So, or capacity skills, maybe. I'm not sure it's the right word. Capacities maybe better. So you have to look at a problem. You have to look at some sort of obstacle to getting things done, and the means to get things done. Well, it's no good me putting Jimmy Jack on that just because he's a black transgender lesbian and Jimmy Jack wants it, because Jimmy Jack can't do that job. He's just not up to it. And I can't put, Susie so-and-so on this because, she doesn't have this experience or something. So I have to put people on who know what they're doing. Then I have to supervise closely those who don't. And so you need to structure things to get things done, to have that successful outcome. And that means you have to make a number of decisions that are directly related to the success of the successful outcome. Now, whatever the successful outcome means, I mean, it could be you've got to move 1 ton of dirt from A to B. So it doesn't matter, whatever the task is, whether it be a complex task, you've got to cut complicated computer code or something simpler. But you have to make those decisions. But and you have to accept accountability for failure. And I knew if I fucked up, that I'd get I'd get beat up, and I knew that, and so it focused my mind on getting things done, and accepting that this guy isn't going to work out there, that won't happen. Okay, no, this person will. I like Jimmy Jack. He's a great guy, but he's fucking useless, so I can't do that. And so on and so forth. So you have to, when you accept those responsibilities and you act on them, you have to develop the thinking skills to determine that. Now that was a successful outcome. Those imperatives, if you like, have been taken off people as in the strictly pass or fail thing. So kids going through junior school don't have to worry about pass or fail. Everyone gets a trophy. Going through senior school, you don't have to have a pass or fail system to get through, which you once did. And I came through the strictly pass or fail system. I was sort of right at the very tail end of that in Australia, at least. Equity systems were already starting to come in, but they hadn't sort of fully arrived at that point in time. And of course, you saw this in the workplace too, where pass or fail was still very much an attitude around, are you qualified? Are you ready for this? Do you have the expertise? And do you have the credentials and so on? And you wouldn't be allowed a very long window of failure before they just took you out. I remember people who at the end of even a few days, being given a supervisory role a few days, no, you're just not up to it, Billy Bob. You have to, and that sort of thing. So when you get this imperative to perform taken off people, the pass or fail thing, and they just get waved through the school and the educate, waved into university, then you've got a lot of low achieving, low IQ people being waved into university. The number of kids at university has expanded by 20-fold from where it was when I was leaving high school. So 20-fold increase, and nearly all of those are low IQ, low perform people who've never had to perform, or never had to think, how can I pass this test? And that makes a big difference to developing the critical thinking skills, because at no point through the system have you had to develop responsibility for outcomes or accountability. Oh shit, I failed. I've got to work harder. I remember as a kid, I failed. Some test, I can't remember what it was now. I was not even 10 years old, but I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm not going to fucking fail that test again. And so I sort of sat down, with the books and just hit it and came back and got a good result. But if it hadn't been for pass or fail, if I'd failed the test in effect and just been given a participation trophy, then that inclination within me to do better would never have been kindled. And I would say the same for really anyone in that sort of situation. So coming back now to this summit. So they've got a whole bunch of people speaking, and the keynote speaker. I mean, the keynote speaker is a lesbian gender activist who thinks that equity for lesbians is the primary purpose of all life and all existence, and is a virtuous golden goal in its own right, and this sort of thing. And that in order to achieve equity, you can't have accountability and so on. So they say, well, why don't the kids have critical thinking? Kids coming through, and even the advanced, again, masters and PhDs, why don't they have critical thinking skills? Well, you know what it is? It's because of fucking Hitler. It's because fucking Nazis are everywhere. Them that are doing it. So they're refusing point blank. The affirmative action flunky is saying, nothing to do with affirmative action, nothing to do with equity, nothing to do with participation trophies. It's just the evil, bad system and the patriarchy and so on and so. So it was just an absolute fantasy gabfest. There was no coming to grips with any form of reality. It's because we don't have enough money in education. If only the government would spend more money, we we could have better outcomes. If only this, if only we had more black lesbians as teachers, if only we had more trans, and just on it went. So it was just a pure globalist, how to undermine society. Maybe the origins of the summit, the very first people were concerned about the lack of critical thinking skills and things like the lack of accountability, lack of responsibility, waving people through participation trophies, all that sort of stuff. Maybe they were, but the globalist propaganda spotted that, no, we don't want that running loose out there. Let's jump all over that one and make sure we've got control and make sure, all the keynote speakers are black lesbians, and we can turn it into an ideological nonsense gabfest. But we can't allow stuff like this to propagate, and that will in turn question or bring into question the globalist project. So it could have been either one. I'm almost half tending to think that the latter was the case there, that they spotted it and realised its propaganda value or propaganda danger if they let it get out of their control. So, but this comes back to the thing that without, in my own case, if I didn't have teachers that encouraged that, or whether in high school or college that didn't encourage that, see both sides of the question, if I didn't have, didn't go into a work environment and have bosses where it was, pass or fail, hey, Billy Bob, you fuck up again, and you're out of this program, those sorts of things, and so you just have to deliver the results, and this creates a critical thinking capacity, or at least fosters it, if not creates it. Again, not everyone put in that situation ended up having those critical thinking, but later on, as like a general manager or an EVP and a VP, this sort of thing. Again, in competitive commercial situations, I had to make decisions. Doing international business and so on, you have to make a lot of decisions, but be accountable for them. You don't. The more complicated the decision, the more huge and the more multiple factors there are, then you tend to be accountable in a different way, in a very overall sense, because most of the people that are your bosses don't have sufficient comprehension of the details to be able to say, hey, you fucked up here and here and here. That they can know that the outcome didn't turn out like they wanted. They can do that, but they're not in a position expertise-wise to even say, look at this, you fucked that up. So your critical thinking has to work on a number of dimensions. Can you get the results? Can you exit the miasma of things without too much cost? If you do this and do that, will that affect something else, and will there be a knock on here? Then you're looking at the office politics, and then you're looking at, so you have to look at things in a number of, but when the primary purpose of the business today is to produce ideological outcomes, then with government guarantees or globalist guarantees for the supposed commercial outcome, which is really a monopoly, oligopoly, or a cartel of some sort, where you really aren't making commercial decisions, then that's changed really the demand. So people aren't getting beat up because they screwed up some commercial thing. They're getting beat up because they didn't hand a report in on time. That's very bureaucratically still important, even the smaller firms today, I've noticed. So they're going to be beat up for not having enough black lesbians on the team. There's a guy I know quite well. He's like a VP of sales at this quite decent sized multinational, and he gets a sort of a memo from HR saying, you don't have enough black lesbians on your sales team, and so you got to get rid of high performing white guys to put in low performing black lesbians, because ideologically that's what we want. And he pushes back and says, well, look, why would I get rid of high performing people to put low performing people on there? Will you lower my budget? So as in, his measuring how his performance is measured. Will you lower my sales budget to account for having lower performing salespeople? And there was some sort of wiggle room on that. But effectively, he says to me, if he misses out on the sales budget, that there's kind of not much of a fuss. He'll get a bit of drama from the the boys, but if he doesn't have enough black lesbians and he pushes back and says, well, no, why would I hire black lesbians who can't perform? Then they'll threaten him with instant dismissal for that. You questioning why about black lesbians on your team, you'll be out of a job tomorrow, buddy. But if he screws up in some commercial sense, that's okay, Jimmy Jack. We can talk about that. We'll sort something out. So completely different. So again, the idea of critical thinking is getting the job done and getting it done effectively and efficiently and with the resources you have and so on. Now, the idea is that being effective and efficient and on time and working hard, it's straight white male fascist Nazi type talk. and certainly my experience in being a boss is that the most reliable people are going to be, in general, I mean, you will always find an exception somewhere. The most reliable people in getting the job done who are going to commit to the goals and see it through will be straight white males. So generally you would find the higher performing teams, and I see it today, high performing teams are generally straight white males, but this of course is changing. So the critical thinking is a direct product or byproduct and an inevitable knock-on product. There's no rocket science mystery about this. It's an inevitable knock-on from programs of equity and participation trophies and ideological emphasis rather than hard reality emphasis. So we live in this fantasy world of imagined equity, and I think that's squeezed pretty much all the critical thinking skills out of it. Now, the other side of the critical thinking skills at the summit was if you criticise and point out the obvious flaws in the climate change propaganda, then you're a Nazi, and a fascist. So if you this is according to the people in the summit, critical thinking really means, can you spot the Nazis and get rid of them? That's what it means. And can you spot someone who disagrees with climate change propaganda or disagrees with transgender propaganda? Because if you can find those people, then you can get rid of the Nazis. It means everybody thinks the same way. So critical thinking is being able to criticize Nazis. So they've even changed the definition of critical thinking. So a lot of insanity there, but I think it sums up the problems and the challenges we have in the Western world today. And I think that summit and those summits like it really typify the decline of Western civilization and what I would see as quite a rapid decline. You've been a task today, your pushback challenge. Thank you for listening.